Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for April 19th, 2022. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our live Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your comments and questions via the chat feature, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature to let us know if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question yourself via audio or video. And we're streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. We're going to start, as usual, by talking about last week's tittle, which was called Recite, Reflect, Reframe. The assignment was to spend some time thinking about language that you use to talk about your life and your stuff, with the goal of talking in a clearer, more thoughtful, and more self-supportive way. We'd love to hear from our participants in Zoom and Facebook who practiced some reframing this week. Please let us know in the comments. Viewer Marshmallow left a couple of comments on our website to share the results of her tittle. They're a little long to share in their entirety, but you can read them yourself by visiting the show notes page for last week's episode at cfhou.com/TCFW115. But here are a few of our favorite parts of Marshmallow's tittle report. Recite. I hate you. You're just stuff. I can't stand this. Nothing is where I need it. Get out of my way. Reflect. Brutally honest echoes of nasty feelings. Self-depriving my worth and happiness, my home, my life. I'm deeply aware of shame generated from negative opinions and nasty neglect mirrored by others. Reframe. Stepping out of shame, sharing and hearing your stories. I'm excited. All this stuff is my treasure hunt. I bet I've got all I need right here. Moving on and moving you all out.
I appreciate so much that Marshmallow shared her vulnerability with us. She took a close look at her words and how they weren't supporting her and reframed them to a much more positive vibe. And that's all that we're asking, is to recognize that sometimes you're not helping yourself because you're being very negative or super judgy about how you face what you're doing. And you can just decide to say it a different way. It's not going to hurt anything if you say it differently, and maybe it'll feel better if you do, and allow you to move forward. And that's our goal. So thank you for doing that, Marshmallow. We appreciate it. And we hope that the rest of you guys got something out of that exercise as well.
I enjoyed the form of her response too, because it was almost like a beat poem or something, very punchy and really very energetic, and with a real strong sense of here's where I started and here's where I ended up. M said, thinking about the tittle, the word I use is crap. Turning to the dictionary, I read that crap, the noun, means something of extremely poor quality, junk, which is likely true because most of what I have was being thrown away by someone else. Reading that crap is also an exclamation of alarm, anger, or annoyance reminded me of my life being shattered by the actions of unscrupulous people who cost me my savings and job and left me without a home for 14 years. There's the alarm of losing my home and life as I knew it, probably anger over how I was treated, and the annoyance of dealing with crappy rather than quality belongings, as junk is much harder to care for. That's a really good point. Then look at crap as a verb. Withdraw from or give up on a game or activity because of fear or fatigue. Fail in what one is attempting to do, and of a machine, break down. All are true in my situation, uncovering why decluttering has been such an impossible chore for me and my withdrawal.
Well, and it sounds like all of your stuff is also associated with a lot of trauma and the explosion of your life from where it was to something that you didn't plan on. And so I can certainly understand that all of your things have a lot of emotion attached to it that are associated with that trauma. And again, we've touched on this before. Those traumas get in the way of all kinds of stuff, and not the least of which is you can't manage the clutter, and it gets in the way of a whole bunch of other emotional, social, interactive things that you are trying to do with your life as well. So clearly you've identified where your negative talk came from, and it's centered around that trauma, and trying to process that trauma and be where you are now and see the clutter as separate from that trauma is really part of your journey. That to recognize that that was a huge transition and a huge discombobulation of your life. It really tore it apart. And 14 years later, you're standing where you're standing and dealing with what you're dealing with, and trying to separate the history of your trauma and the feelings of your trauma from the stuff in front of you, and seeing it through eyes that are clearer is the goal that you're shooting for here. And so sometimes the part that comes in front of decluttering is dealing with the trauma that prevents you from dealing with the decluttering.
Yeah.
And hopefully, because you're here and you're talking about it, that this is part of your journey. And I hope that we're giving you some good ideas and processes to deal with this a little bit differently. And thanks for telling us that.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for sharing that. Naomi said, I don't mind that some of my stuff is crap because it relieves me of the responsibility of taking care of it. Only the smallest number of most precious things should be allowed to have my care. The rest, the cats can scratch up as much as they like. And they will.
Exactly. And they will.
Okay, let's get on with our main event.
Okay.
Some of us approach organizing projects with our heads stuffed full of myths, legends, and bald-faced lies that we've heard, the product of popular TV shows, mass market books, nagging parents, other people's confusion, and so on. Today, Gayle is going to uncover the realities hiding behind some of these popular misconceptions about decluttering your stuff. And I should say at this point, there was some confusion, and Bigfoot is not going to be participating in today's webcast. That was more of just a cultural reference.
I love that you managed to work Bigfoot into the title today. And we can see that Bigfoot is behind me here. It's a great metaphor, though, for the slightly inflated, exaggerated, or made up stuff we tell ourselves about our stuff and what it's worth. There's a psychological effect at work here that tricks us into our inflated sense of monetary value associated with our belongings. That tendency to overinflate the value of something that you own has an official name, and it's called the endowment effect. What is the endowment effect, you ask? The endowment effect is an emotional bias that says once we own something or have a feeling of ownership, like when you've put it in your cart at the store, we irrationally overvalue it regardless of its objective value. The endowment effect occurs because of two psychological reasons. First is loss aversion. That means that we feel the pain of loss twice as strongly as we feel the pleasure over a gain of the same amount. Loss aversion is wanting to avoid the pain of loss because we feel it more acutely. The second part of the endowment effect is that feeling of ownership. We fall in love with what we already have, and we're prepared to pay more to retain something that we already own than we would pay for an item that we don't own. It's also shown that we're unwilling to trade something that we already own in exchange for something of equal value. And that's the bedrock upon which the storage unit industry is built. Why buy something else later when you can put what you've paid for now in a rental home for perpetuity? So the endowment effect creates a myth in your mind about what your stuff is worth. That's one of the myths we'll cover today, along with several others. I've broken them down into some categories for you because I like to sort things. I already talked about the myth that all of your collectibles are seriously more valuable than they actually are. That's the first myth under the value category. And the next one is that at that garage sale that you're going to make a whole lot of money without a lot of work, and it's going to happen in a couple of hours. Anyone who's had a garage sale knows this is mostly not true. Oh, there are some sales that have a whole house worth of stuff and lots of furniture and appliances, and those sales can rack up the dough. But moving that much product takes a whole lot of work, and usually it takes all weekend. There's a reason why an estate sale company takes days to prepare for a sale, usually a week, and sells for the whole weekend and staffs the sale with all kinds of people. It takes that kind of work and effort to get the most money out of a sale like this. And you're not usually going to run your own garage sale like an estate sale. Even an estate sale has to have lots of valuable items to run up the sale total. So getting rich quick with no work is a myth and not the usual reality of all of your hard work. The next value myth is that my great grandma's china, crystal, and silverware is worth more now than great grandma paid for it originally by far. I don't know how many times I've had to break this to people, but the interest in and the cultural standard for having crystal, china, and silverware has drastically shifted over the last century. We don't entertain in this formal way anymore as the standard. It's not our standard to do it, that we have formal dinners often. We're much more casual as a society now, and the average household doesn't use these items, they just inherit them. So the resale value on these items has plummeted. There's not much of a secondary market for them, and resale shops are drowning in sets of grandma's beautiful china and crystal. It isn't that the craftsmanship is any less gorgeous than it ever was. It's just that people don't use this kind of formal dinnerware with any regularity at all. Some people use them 2 to 3 times a year, but most don't ever take them out of storage. Sorry, but the times when these items held their value has passed. Use them if you think they're fabulous. Otherwise, don't expect to get rich on them. And I'm sorry to be the dumper of that cold bucket of water on your head. That's a good myth to let go of, is what I'm saying. My next myth category is myths about working with an organizer. Like myth number 1, at your appointment, the organizer is there to rip things out of your hand against your will. This myth is out there because the TV shows portray it a little like that. In some of the old shows, an organizer would trade new stuff in exchange for the client letting go of something they were reluctant to surrender. Remember Niecy Nash and Clean House? Even with the offer of brand new items, the endowment effect made many of the homeowners struggle to let go of the thing that the organizer was trying to get out of the house. Also, the shows about hoarding feature all the confrontations between the organizers and the therapists and the clients. It creates the illusion that all organizing appointments are like that, very confrontational and argumentative. No organizer I know works like that. It's not a great business model to argue with your clients and try to force them to do something they don't want to do. The reality is the organizer is going to ask about what to keep and toss. They're going to explain where the volume outstrips the space. They're going to suggest what could be thinned out, but you're always in control of what actually leaves the house. And that's always. If your kids are there helping you organize, that may not be true. They may be taking things out against your will, but the organizer is not going to do it that way. The second myth about organizing is that an organizing appointment will be dramatic and painful as it is on television. It's not so. Most of my appointments are a bit of an emotional struggle as we're confronting stuff that you've failed to conquer up to that point. Most often it's a touch of emotion and then a lot of work with a big dose of relief at the end. I was just with somebody last week who she laughs now and she says, "What is it about you guys and me crying?" There's always some point during the day where she tears up for a few minutes and then it passes and we're back to work again. But I think that once an appointment time, 3 minutes of tearing up is kind of normal. And that's really what most people experience. They don't experience a bunch of emotional breakdown for hours and hours on end at my typical appointment anyway. Myth number 3 about organizing. The end goal of an organizing appointment is to achieve a Pinterest level perfectness in the space. Those Pinterest photos are a frozen moment of time where all is arranged exactly so until the second your kids come home or you need something from the pantry. Your appointment can shoot for a different target than that. like clearing out that space on the floor. It only needs to be organized until you're comfortable with the results. It doesn't have to look Pinterest perfect to call it done. Another organizing myth is you need to add a bunch of products or spend a lot of money on products to get organized. In reality, most of the time I use what's already there, and I might suggest one or two specific products that a client might want to add. And here's the news flash of the day. It's not the abundance of organizing products that suddenly fixes the problem. Products are helpful and that they're part of an organizing system, but creating a system or a process, a pathway, creating those action steps to manage all different types of stuff is the real goal. Putting stuff in pretty bins one time is not going to solve the ongoing issue of clutter. It's just a step in the process. And that's why everybody always wants to know what they should go buy. When I come on the appointments, what should I have? Do you want me to go buy products? No, I don't. That's not the first step. Here's another myth about organizing. The organizer can magically make it all fit in the room that is currently 3 feet deep, and I'll be able to find everything easily and I won't have to give up anything. Yet that is not exactly correct. If your room is dense with items, the organizer can better arrange it into a storage-like environment where everything is neatly packed in, which happens a lot in think basements or out-of-way closets. But the minute you need something, the whole room is going to explode because you'll be pulling stuff out to get to other stuff, and you likely won't put it back the same way. So sure, the organizer can pack it all in there better, but you need one thing out of there and you've opened the chip can of spring-loaded snakes and it all pops out explosively all over everywhere. The truth is, a room that's overstuffed has to be unstuffed. You're going to have to give something up to make what stays in the room work and to be usable.
Any words of wisdom on how to encourage a family member, in my case, my sister, to hire a professional organizer to help her? That question is from Susan.
Okay, Susan. So I'm going to assume that she's a little prickly when you try to talk to her about it. Some people are surprised when you say to them, you should probably get an organizer, which definitely says to people hear that as you're failing at what you're doing. Therefore, you need some help. So I think it's better to say up front in the way that you're talking about it. An organizer can help you get there faster. I know that you're overwhelmed. I know that this is something that you're struggling with. An organizer might make this process easier. So focus on the positive results that an organizer can give them, not emphasizing what she's failing at, I guess is the way I'm trying to say that.
Yeah, leave out any tone of judgment and try to just come across with nothing but compassion and care.
And care, right? And you may have to say, if she's talking about it, if she's complaining about it, then that sort of gives you an opening. If you have to breach the subject yourself, then you might want to say something like, I know you're struggling with this and it's taking you more time than you want it to. You don't have to say, gosh, it's really taking you a long time. What's the problem? You can say, I know you'd rather not spend this much time at it, but it's taking a long time. And so maybe it would be faster if you got in a professional that had the skill set to work on it. You can sort of focus on how an organizer is providing support and providing skills that the person doesn't have in a way that it's like you're not that you're failing, but that nobody has the skill set that an organizer does, that somebody that does it for a living has way more experience and many more tricks and tips up their sleeve than the average person. And so tapping into that expertise is just like hiring the landscape guy to do the landscaping, or getting the doctor to look at something that's wrong instead of treating yourself, right? It's better to have a professional step in at some point if you want to gain the benefit of speeding up the process, shortcutting the process, being more efficient at the process. And hopefully that'll help. You can also suggest that they go watch videos, right? Like, I've been watching this lady here. She has some great ideas. You can watch this video too, and it's free. And
Hold up the YouTube sign.
hold up the YouTube sign. Here's the YouTube sign. Da, da, da. That's something that you can do because it's free and it's easy and it's passive. They just have to listen. And so just having the experience of listening to an organizer talk and make suggestions makes it easier to explain the process of how they would work, and gives them an idea that it's not, the person isn't going to be mean and scary. And so it might make it easier for them to contemplate the idea. So the last organizer myth I'm going to talk about is no matter how dense it is, 4 hours is enough to fix it. That is in no way the truth. That's just clean time blindness. You want it to take 4 hours to complete, so you believe that 4 hours is enough to fix it. Don't be surprised when that barely scratches the surface of what you have to do. A room that's neglected for 6 weeks or 6 months that started out totally clear before that, maybe we could fix it in 4 hours. But a room neglected for a year or more that was over full to begin with, it's going to take a long time to dial it back, and you have to plan for that time. So let's move to another myth category, paper myths. There's a lot of myths about paper. Myth number 1, you have to shred every instance of your name and address to protect yourself against identity theft. Especially if you own your own home, your name and address is part of the public record. Nobody needs to get into your trash to get your name and address. It's more important to focus on the data that gives them direct access to all your information, like full account numbers, social security numbers, health data that you prefer stay private, like your doctor's names or medical reports, bank names or account balances. That's what needs to be shredded. But all instances of your name and address are not necessary to shred. And I have a lot of older clients. There was a moment in time where I'm sure someone recommended to all seniors that they needed to be shredding their name and address so that it couldn't be plucked out of the trash. But that type of identity theft is 100% old school now and really not where your risk lies.
Well, and I think it's more urban legend than anything else. It's, some of it is, there are certainly unscrupulous paparazzi and journalists and such who would dig around in celebrity trash looking for something meaty, but there are, really since the advent of the internet, there are 1,000 good hacker ways to get illicit access to someone's information than digging in trash bags.
Yeah, exactly. And so truthfully, you want to worry about, you don't want your social security number out in your trash can. You don't want your full credit card number out in your trash can. And that's worth shredding. But every instance of your name on every envelope that comes in your house, no. And people get stalled because they think I have to shred that. And then they pile up a mountain of mail that then they feel like has to be put through the personal shredder, and they're creating hours and hours of work that really isn't necessary. So I just want you to pay attention to that and make an attempt to do it differently if you can.
And they burn up their little
kill their
little Office Depot shredder that's only designed to do about 10 sheets a day, not 10,000 sheets.
5 hours. Yes. I worked on a client job where they had a $100 shredder and they had mountains of backlog of shredding. And they didn't want me to take it away. They didn't want to leave the house. They didn't want to hire the truck to come. And so I sat there and shredded for hours and killed the machine. Like I made like 25 bags of shredding. We went through a whole bag of shred bags and I filled all those up, and it kept overheating and it, nonstop. I oiled it, kept dying, it was just, and then it just was like, oh no, I'm done. And it just died. Those little motors are not designed for high volume shredding. And so sure, if you go do your mail every day, you can go put, 5 pieces of mail in the shredder and that'll be fine. But you can't do backlogs on those little machines. Okay, so here's the next myth about paper. You have to keep tax records forever or for 7 years. That is definitely the old rule. The current audit period is 3 years. So you can check that, and you can see that on the IRS website, irs.gov. 6 years for business returns. So unless you're committing fraud, and then they can do whatever they want, they can go back as far as they want. But I suggest keeping the returns themselves forever, which is the 5, 10, 15 pages of return itself. And then shred the supporting documents after the audit period. So those supporting documents, all of the pieces of paper that gave you the numbers on the return, that's the bulk of the material that gets stored and kept for too long. So for your personal returns, after the 3 filing years have gone by, then you can, they can go back 3 years to audit. So if you can start shredding material after 3 years of filed returns, or 6 years for a business, after those 3 years or 6 years have gone by, then you can start shredding stuff behind. And then once you get the shredding for those returns done as a backlog, then every year you put a new one in, and you can go and take the oldest one out and keep the return and shred all the supporting materials. So just make it be part of your circular processing. You add in a new one, you take out an old one and shred some stuff.
And Gayle, is the years that Gayle mentioned are that's specific
US.
to the United States.
Yes, 100%.
So check your experience may differ.
Yes.
M suggested, as an alternative to shredding, get a gerbil, which is a good point. They will turn paper into shreds so fast it'll make your head spin. We had gerbils when I was growing up.
That's so funny.
Tammy had a question that I thought you could talk about, and that was about Tammy said, I felt shocked that professional organizers I contacted have minimum hours. And she said, I would love an organizer for ADHD. I've been asking my psychiatrist, social worker, but it's hard to find that way. And she mentioned that someone had told her that, 4 hours was their minimum. And for face-to-face visits, you don't do a visit shorter than 3 hours yourself.
Yeah. 4 hours, 3 hours is a common standard in the industry. Some people do 4.
Well, and you'll do 4 if somebody has the appetite for 4.
Yeah. But usually what happens is people think that they want 4, and then way before you get through 4 hours, they're flagging. They're really tired and overwhelmed and feel run down from all the hard work. So my experience with clients over the years has been that 3 hours is about the time where people's brain starts to melt, because I've been asking you questions for 3 hours straight and asking you to make decisions, and you get decision fatigue and you get really stressed, strained, overused, overworked brain. And so that 3 hour time limit really works for me. Occasionally I will have people that want 4 hours, but when they sign on for that, either they're very young and energetic, or they have one very specific problem to focus on, and they are not feeling sentimental about it. It's just work that they need to get done, and they just want the expertise and the help to get through it quicker. And there are those motivated people that can sort of blow through for 4 hours without interruption. But 3 hours is usually when most people start to truly flag. And so, and the point of having minimum hours is, I'm going to have to travel some portion of an hour to get to you. And then I'm going to have to travel that another portion of another hour to get away from you, to get home or to the next client. And so showing up to work for an hour or 2 hours is not worth the travel time for me. And I also find that an hour gets an hour's worth of work done, but it doesn't get you very far down the path. And so,
well, because there's always there's the time it takes to get everybody up to speed, and there's the time it takes to clean up and put away and carry out the stuff that you're carrying out. And that's about half of that hour, probably, right?
Yeah. And the first part of any kind of decluttering process is to destroy it, is to tear everything up. And I would hate to tear it up and then be done with the hour and walk away and it looks worse than when you started. So that 3 hour minimum allows me to deconstruct an area, make a bunch of keep toss decisions with you and put some things back so that it looks like you made a progress and you accomplished a win in a particular area. And so that's why I go for 3 hours at least, so that I can get that done and give you something that looks like we got to the end. And I see somebody says I can barely tolerate 2 hours. It is possible because I'm showing up to be your hands and feet, right? Like I'm the one that's going to run around and walk around and do stuff. And I'm going to be carrying and hauling and fetching and moving. And so I work with clients, for instance, who I have a client that is sitting in a chair with the oxygen tube on. So I bring everything to her. I carry everything over to her and let her look through it. And then based on the decision she makes, then I go and disperse, put it back, take it to my car, put it in the trash, whatever. And so when you have somebody there to help you, then we can accommodate your physical capacity and be supportive in whatever way we need to make it work for you, to stay on it.
Well, we should also mention that you are not the only organizer in the world offering virtual organizing these days. True?
It's true. Absolutely.
And so hold up the virtual sign. Let's remind people that you can work with Gayle online, and visit cfhou.com/virtual for details on how that works exactly. But you can book an hour at a time for virtual organizing, since there's no travel involved, and it can be a little more, there's a little more efficiency to that part.
And the process virtually is either you're showing me the space and I'm helping you make plans, or you have a particular area that you're stuck on and you want me to support you through getting through it. And so I have sat on the call while somebody looks through their mail and shows me what it is, and we talk about it, what needs to be done with it. I've sat with somebody while they opened the refrigerator and pulled out the food, and I help them make decisions about it. So it's clearly a more concentrated amount of time, and we work on a much smaller project. But I would say that half the time I'm actually helping someone sit and work on a specific task and being their body double and asking questions and helping them get past their decision blocks where they don't know what to do next. Or I'm looking at the whole project and talking about the steps that need to be done to make it happen, and helping people create a plan that then they go execute after we get off the phone and check in with me later. So it is a good way to have a little bit of support if you can't stand to have 3 hours of actual support in person.
And to your knowledge, what percentage of organizers would you say are now offering virtual services? And is an hour, is that typical?
Yeah. And some people sell them as packages, like you buy 6 appointments of an hour at a time or something like that. Like they'll have, a bundle, and you commit to interacting with the organizer 5 times or 10 times or whatever. Or like they do it like me and sell them a la carte. And when you want to talk to me for an hour, you pay and talk to me for an hour. And so, I would say most organizers are doing some version of virtual, unless they're just really new and they haven't quite gotten their own business systems up to speed to handle it. But I would say most of them are doing virtual now. All right. So I have one more myth about paper that I want to add. So we were talking about paper myths. And we talked about you don't have to shred your name. You don't have to keep your tax records forever. The last one is that someday when the mailman is on vacation for 2 weeks, you'll have some free time and then you'll catch up on the mail. Now, the mail person goes on vacation, but the mail delivery never actually stops, right? The only way you're ever going to catch up is to deal with the mail as it comes in. Today's mail is the smallest pile you'll ever get. After that, you've added tomorrow's mail and it's doubled in size, the pile. By Saturday, the pile is 6 times the size it was on Monday, and you get Sunday off before it starts right back up again. If you're waiting for the day to come when you've got a lot of free time and the mail will stop while you deal with the backlog, I'm afraid you're going to die before that ever takes place. The truth is you've got to handle it often and forever, because the mail will keep coming even after you exit the planet. There will still be mail coming to your house with your name on it. So the mail is one of those things that is part of our daily life, and it's going to be part of our daily life forever. And so figuring out a way for you to process it while it is a reasonable amount and not irritating and not overwhelming and doesn't take 16 hours straight to accomplish would be only in service to your mental health. All right, so there's another myth category about productivity. We have some productivity myths to talk about. The first one is, it's not worth doing unless I can make it perfect. It's the word perfect that's the problem with that statement. Some people do let perfect be the enemy of done, or they forget that there are a few steps between starting and getting to perfect. Just like driving 0 to 80 is not instantaneous, so is getting a room to look perfect, not the instant result. So there are a few stages to getting there, and working on one stage at a time is okay. Clearing out what you don't want in the room is a first stage. Rearranging what you do want in the room is another stage. Testing out how the room works in real life is a third stage. You just need to get comfortable with the idea that making it perfect will take more than one afternoon or more than one work session that you have scheduled. If you can be happy with completing stage 1 today on the way to getting perfect, it might be perfect by next week or next month. I have an example in my own life. I don't know if I talked about this already, but I worked on the garage, and I have needed to work on the garage because the pandemic backed up my garage with donations that I couldn't take for a while. And then we had a leak in February 2020, when there's a big freeze here, and then our pipes burst in the garage. So then there was a bunch of wet damage stuff from the leak. And then there was a bunch of construction chaos from the repair, and all of that needed to be cleaned out and rearranged and fixed. And that was a multi-stage project. I could not do it all in one day. And I made several appointments to go deliver donations. That was the first thing. I removed things that could be donated and was finally able to take them to the places that I was allowed to donate. And then I spent some time cleaning some of the areas that needed to be swept out, cleaned up, picked up. Then I got to near junk hauling day, when the junk dump truck is going to come around and pick up junk. And I worked in the garage to extract all the things that I was going to send to the junk place. And usually what I do is I do it early. I go put it all on the curb, and I took a picture and put it on Nextdoor. And most of it got picked up by somebody else before the junk guy ever came. But it allows me to put it out on the curb without making the homeowners association mad. And so I do it at the same time as junk hauling. So that was another day. And then when all of the junk got out, then I did some rearranging and some more cleaning. And I had the leaf blower guy come and blow some of the dust out of the garage. And so that was a process that I've been working on accomplishing over probably a 4-month period, with various afternoons of doing some part of the process. And so it took a long time. It's still not perfect, but it took a long time to get the improvement that I've got. So perfect is the enemy of good or done. And you definitely want to not wait to start it until you know you can make it be perfect in that afternoon, because that's not really a possibility most of the time. Here's another productivity myth. There's an organizing system that works for everyone. That is not true. Marie Kondo is the new clutter messiah for some people, and her process of keeping what sparks joy and thanking stuff for its service to you is working for some people. For others, it makes them want to scream. So the truth is, there's no one size fits all system. Whatever system motivates you to do what you need to do to maintain your space and to be happy in it is the right one. So the search isn't to find the one that works for everybody. The search is to find the system that works for you. The last productivity myth here is I will get organized when I retire. The reality is you still want to avoid doing it then. You'll just have different excuses to avoid it. So this myth is about waiting for the perfect time in your life when you'll have tons of free time with nothing else to do, and you will suddenly have an insane urge to get working on it. It's not going to happen. Just like you're not leaving it to your kids to do, don't leave it to an older version of yourself to do when you have more achy joints and less mobility with less energy. You want to do it now, and you want to recognize that there's always going to be an excuse not to do it. And so fessing up to that adult truth and moving on anyway is your goal as an organizer person, a person who's trying to get organized. Okay, let's move on to some judgment myths, ways that we judge ourselves harshly that are truly myths. So the first one is, I should be able to do it all by myself. That is a very harsh judgment that we use on ourselves. My question is, why? Why should you be able to do it all yourself? Is that your skill set? You can do your own tax return, for instance, but are you the best person to do it? Do you have the best skills to apply to that task? You can cook for yourself, but are you the best person to do it? If you feel like you don't have the ability or the understanding to declutter, then why assume that you should be able to do it? Now, partially because sometimes we have people in our lives saying you should be able to do this. What's your problem? Why can't you do this? And you have to like tune those people out because they're just making it worse. We don't all have the same skills, and not having a certain skill set is not a failing as a human. It's just a truth about ourselves. Now I would say I should be able to learn to do it myself, and I can agree with that one. You can learn, but you need a teacher or another resource to learn from. Why not learn from someone who has the skill set and get it done while also learning some of the skills yourself? That's a much better way to think about it. It isn't that you should be able to do it yourself. The truth is you should be able to learn to do some of it. And in order to learn, you need to have a teacher. Here's the next myth about judgment. I'm disorganized because I'm lazy. I'm pretty sure that's just negative self-talk and not the reality at all. Is there some element of avoidance to doing a chore? Sure, probably. No one likes to declutter, and no one likes scrubbing a toilet. So you may be avoiding the task, but calling yourself lazy is just punishment. I refer you to the previous myth. You should be able to do it. You're likely disorganized because you don't have the skill set and you need to learn some new skills. That's all. In other words, you're not being lazy. You just need to learn something. My last myth for the day is about storage. The myth is that a storage unit is going to solve your clutter problem. The truth is it expensively outsources your problem. And it's an example of the endowment effect. Because you own it, you're ready to spend more time to keep it rather than trade it out for something else, or to let it go and spend money in the future when you need something. Trading monthly rent in perpetuity for keeping stuff you already paid for is truly the endowment effect in action. Sometimes we need to store stuff for a short time, but parking it forever in its own apartment seems an extreme way to hold on to stuff you can't be bothered to use or go through. Storage units do solve some short-term problems, but they ultimately create a very expensive long-term problem. So I'm hoping that those myths have gotten you started in thinking about myths that you tell yourself. And I'm wondering if any of you want to share your personal myths with me.
Connie said, had a myth discussion with DH today. There is only one method to get decluttered/organized. We both think the other one's method is wrong, obviously not working. Can you speak to that kind of disparity of style?
Yes. So everybody has a process that works for them, right? And you may not be able to each do the other's process. You might either suggest that each of you work on a room alone and do your process yourself, or decide to trade back and forth. Today we do this process, tomorrow we do that process, or find out, have a conversation about the processes each of you are using and talk about why that works for you and how it's helpful or not helpful. Other than judging your spouse as wrong, which is part of the benefits of marriage, you get to tell somebody they're wrong and stupid with impunity. We probably don't want to go there with this. We want this to be a cooperative venture. So everybody can agree that telling each other that they're wrong is not going to accomplish our ultimate goal as a family, which is to get the space organized. And instead talking about, okay, what about this process works for you? Why is it helpful? Like, have you explained to your husband why this works for you, and have him explain to you why that his way works for him? What about that helps? Maybe it's just that it's always the way that you've done it. And so that's the one that you feel like you know what you're doing because that's how you've always done it. Maybe it's that in order to deal with the volume, then they have to do it in the steps that they do to deal with the overwhelm that the process creates for them. And so you can sort of, if you're willing to, okay, let's do it your way today, and let's talk about why it works for you. So you're making these piles this way, and how does that help you? And let them explain it to you. And maybe there's some part of that process that you can understand, or you can suggest modifications to that makes it work for you as well as them. So, it's going to be a collaborative exploration, and you have to know that everybody does the process in the way that feels the most comforting to them and most familiar to them. And we often don't question why we do it that way. So agreeing and taking the time to talk about what we're doing and how it helps might help you see the goals, see where it's relieving their anxiety or making them feel less overwhelmed. Maybe the way that you do it is really too visually overwhelming for your partner, or maybe the categories that he uses don't make sense because you don't use the stuff in the same way. Like, there's probably some practical reasons why each of your style doesn't work for the other. But if you understand a little bit better, you might be able to A, live with it for a moment, B, cope with it as you work, and maybe adjust some things to make it more palatable for both of you. That was a long answer to a short question, but
it's a complex question.
It is complex, right?
And I would add one small thing, which is try to keep your focus on what you both agree on.
Yes.
The end goal, maybe some low-hanging fruit of, oh, well, we both think this junk that's taking up half the garage needs to go. Let's deal with that. Because for one thing, you may bring the stress level down. You may bring some of the tension down by handling some easy stuff.
Right.
And
some people, they have conflict as spouses negotiate because you've probably been arguing about this your whole marriage in some form. And you have some tapes playing in your head. Like, when this happens, when she says this, then I start going, you have some automatic responses. And so interrupting those automatic responses, and again, concentrating on the goals and how can we do this in a loving manner that supports each other is, yes, it's going to take a while, but we default to the person that we love the most is the one that we are the least filtered with and the most reactive with. I think it's an environment where we feel safe, and therefore we are safer to act more badly. And I think acknowledging that this is a place where acting badly probably isn't going to get you the result you want it's a good place to go. I need to be very careful here, and we need to be very respectful to each other in this moment, because A, we have lots of old history about fighting about this stuff, and B, we're trying to get a different result than we ever have before. Our old processes without thought have accomplished the mess that we have, and we need to forge a different path to get a new result. And everybody being on board with that. I find sometimes when I'm working with people, a husband and wife will bark at each other in a way that I'm like, whoa, that is not what is happening. They surprise me with how they're sharply critical and mean and judgmental to each other. And like, wow, this is an old argument, or y'all just really have a lot of comfort in being mean to each other, because that's not going to get us anywhere. And the other day I was with somebody who was speaking to her husband in a way that I thought was super gritchy, angry. And I said something and she was like, is that what it sounds like? I'm like, yeah, it sounds like you are being really mad at him right now. And I think she was surprised to realize that it didn't sound like that to her in her head. And she was surprised it sounded like that out in the world. And so I think we get used to the way that we talk to our spouses, and we forget what it reads like to a third party, or we've gotten used to the rhythms and we talk down or talk across or talk angry and don't realize that that's just become the norm, but it's still angry and it's still sending a message of non-cooperation.
I managed to poke you to get you to make your long answer to a short question even longer. And so we are quickly running out of time. So a couple of quick announcements.
Okay.
Well, first, let's talk about next week when we will not be here. We are taking a week off because Gayle is attending the NAPO National Conference in my hometown of Baltimore.
It's time for the conference.
But we'll be back in 2 weeks on Tuesday, May 3rd at noon U.S. Central Time. Graduation season is about to start, and parents everywhere will be scrambling to launch their graduates into college life, often with little cash and strict space limitations. Even if college isn't in the plans, your kids may need help establishing a space of their own. In our next episode, we'll offer low-cost, space-saving suggestions for organizing starter apartments, dorm rooms, and other such compact spaces. Join us on May 3rd for Tight Spots, Tiny Budgets, Outfitting Dorm Rooms and Apartments. Let's get to the tittle.
Today's tittle is Bust a Myth. This week's assignment is to see if you can deconstruct a decluttering myth that's keeping you stuck. Reflect on your attitudes and beliefs about your organizing process and projects. Are any of them based on myths that we talked about in this episode? That's what you want to see. Have you been saying some of these things to yourself? Think about where you've stalled in your process, and especially about whether you're holding on to a belief that stops your progress, such as the final result has to be perfect, or I'm saving this for the garage sale. And let's craft an alternative statement or approach to your myth-bound behavior. Donate or dispose of the theoretical garage sale treasures, or recycle or trash the mountain of mail with your name on it instead of saving it for shredding. Let's see if we can shine a light on some of those myths you've been telling yourself, and then take an action to refute that myth and to stand in reality instead. And let's see how it goes. Let us know how it goes.
Okay, we mentioned the YouTube channel, but I did not read the sign. So if you wouldn't mind holding up the YouTube one again. And that's just a reminder that we have more than 200 videos on lots of topics at cfhou.com/YouTube. We had a comment that I didn't get to address asking about help with paper, and I wanted to point that person on Facebook to our channel. If you look at playlists, there's a paper playlist that has at least 3 or 4 videos in it
talking
already,
about paper.
We hope will be useful to you. And I'm still working every week on categorizing videos into playlists. So keep checking back on those playlists. We'll get more and more videos in them every week.
Right.
If you are watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by going to cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. One of the benefits of subscription is you'll get a weekly email that points you to the show notes, the YouTube video, and so forth.
And to remind you that the next video is coming.
Remind you about what our next topic is and how to RSVP for it and all of that. We love to hear from you. So please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming in YouTube, on Facebook, and anywhere else that you find us. You can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks, everybody. I wanted to make a little shout out to Rowan because Rowan is a very participatory watcher. She's been watching for a long time and she always has lots of comments to say. I know she comments in the chat a lot. She sends us emails all the time. We can't even keep up with all the things she sends. So we appreciate her participation. And one of the things that she said last week that really struck me was, I've been watching the Clutter Fairy Weekly all this time, and I'm just now noticing that it's about so much more than just the stuff. It's like, yes, it is. It's about so much more than just the stuff. And these myths that we talked about today are a prime example. So thanks for that comment, Rowan. And we love that you guys come every week. We're so happy to see you, and we will see you when I get back from conference.
Bye-bye.
Bye.